right. Welcome back to the Feronis podcast. My name is Justin Kubek, and with
And
me.
I'm Rico Camacho.
And before we get started, we're going to go through our usual things at the end. I feel like this is still a new thing for us. So, to start off with, the 988 Lifeline. Whether you're facing mental health struggles, emotional distress, alcohol or drug use concerns, or just need someone to talk to, their caring counselors are here for you. You are not alone. Call, text, or chat anytime. And for our event, we have.
Coping with stress through journaling. This is huge. So if you are stressed out, this is a 1 hour presentation that will discuss chronic stress and its impact on physical and mental health. Participants will be introduced to the practice of journaling as a coping technique to protect their well-being. June 24th from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. at the Menominee Falls Senior Center. All ages event must register online. Info will be in the description. I actually love this event because um, throughout my journey, I'll call it of whether you want to call it, well, a mixture of mental health, spiritual, self-help books. A lot of, I've read from Jay Shetty to Brene Brown, we'll talk about, to Deepak Chopra. Don't know if I pronounced his last name right. Sorry if I didn't. Um, Neil Donald Walsh, Esther
I
Hicks.
am terrible with names, so
I
proud
have,
of you.
thank you. I'm doing the best I can. Well, as a teacher, you got a lot of practice.
That's
I've got a
awesome.
lot of weird names. So I've read all a spectrum of books, and one of the things that they all talk about is within the concept. I know I talked one of the previous episodes about, self-help and understanding yourself as in relation to others, and when do you actually need some time for yourself. Again, there's nothing wrong with taking time for yourself, but then jumping back into the actual world and interacting with people is always a balance. Now, coping with stress through journaling is very interesting because everyone tells you to journal. And I used to journal a lot, and it was very therapeutic. It's gotten to the point with me now where I sometimes just talk to myself. Sometimes it's the best person to talk to because only you know you the best. You're with yourself 24/7.
Mm.
And so journaling was a great first step for me to really understand how I can communicate with myself.
I will interject and just say talking to yourself is not a bad thing until you start disagreeing.
Well, never. Well, that's the fun part. Good luck disagree with yourself because that'll be a fun time for you.
Well, I mean, we're talking about mental health struggles and mental health conditions, and that might be one to get checked out.
Oh yeah, I guess. Well, not even disagreeing with yourself when you're talking to yourself about what from the outside. Like if I were to say right now, okay, if I were to communicate with myself about how I feel,
Hmm.
that's different than, hey, that tree is coming at me, or I think that this blade of grass is throwing knives at me. I don't think that the blade of grass is throwing knives at me, and that tree is not coming to attack me. Now, if I were to tell myself, all right, I'm feeling really low today. Why am I feeling low? Well, I might be feeling low because, earlier today I just, I saw something that threw me off. Well, why did it throw you off? That's healthy talking to yourself. That's what we can use. Healthy talking to
Yeah,
yourself,
I like that.
as opposed to, you're right.
Uh,
There are, what do you call those? There are concepts in the DSM that if you're talking to yourself and harming yourself, well, that is actually that's a good gauge. If you're harming yourself or others, generally speaking, and even talking to yourself about harming yourself, what does that look like? How can you get help or talk yourself into loving yourself?
right. And this is also another time to remind you, the viewer, we are not professionals as we talk about these topics. In no way are we trying to make health recommendations or
No.
things like that. So if you have questions, if what we're saying is making you go, well, all right, now that the world hasn't fallen over anymore, where are we?
Um, we're talking about how we're not professionals.
Oh, speaking of which, we're definitely not professionals. This is not health advice. This is not us trying to tell you what to do. But if what we're saying is making you think maybe, then then find that professional and ask them. Because if the curiosity's there, the problem might be there too. Something's making you ask those questions. All right, now we're back again.
Okay.
So we've talked a lot about vulnerability and how, I mean, that's incorporated into the Feronis brand as a whole. It wasn't really something that I noticed though right away. It wasn't something that I built in with intention. It wasn't until I was reading the articles that the California Gazette and New York Weekly had written about Furonis. And they pointed out that one of the biggest strengths within the brand is vulnerability. And it really caused me to take a moment to internalize that. What does that mean? And what does that look like? Um, you know,
So, and I, yeah, on that note, is I love that his brand did this. That was also something else that I found very, very attractive to the brand was one of the books I read and really took a lot away from was this book Atlas of the Heart. Now, I know it's a bestseller, so some of you who do watch this podcast may have read it. If you haven't, I highly suggest it. Brene Brown, the author, is a PhD in psychotherapy, and she decided to go into actual research studies on how to express emotion and communicate emotion. And she found that vulnerability is the key concept to managing and understanding emotions. Why vulnerability, did she say? She said this because in one of the hardest things to do, men, women, and children, is to feel like you are exposed, right? You are out here um, emotionally vulnerable. Like, so for example, a pop culture example is when a girl or a boy or whatever, when you express your romantic feelings for somebody, the fear of rejection, the fear
hmm
of all of that
you're
comes
putting
out.
yourself out there.
You're being vulnerable,
Right.
right? And so what happens sometimes I've heard when the person is turned down, oh my God, there's depression, anger, there's a lot of things that happen when you put yourself in that vulnerable state. Sometimes I've seen people accept the offer to date someone simply because they feel bad and they put themselves in a vulnerable state. Now they're with somebody that didn't really connect with like they thought they would.
Well, and I'd like to add that things like anger or sadness as a response to putting yourself out there and maybe being rejected or it not going the way that you wanted it to go are easy options to turn to. When you take the time to, explore those emotions, the next time they run around or roll around, you're going to be able to handle them a little bit easier. You're going to be able to, maybe spin that into a learning experience or, something that you can use to build yourself up rather than break yourself down.
Well, and I love that you said the word learning experience because that's actually what Brene Brown discusses is how can you turn this vulnerable state into a superpower?
Right.
How can you turn this because they say that the opposite of love is not hate, it's fear.
Mm.
And that's one thing she actually brings up. Sorry, the professional said that, not me. And she was getting into the fact of fear is what 99.9% of the time causes wars, causes what help me here. I know genocide. I should have known that. So like for example, and again, pop culture history, quite literally, Adolf Hitler put into the German people of the National Socialist Party that they need to be afraid of the Jews because they were taking their money, they were taking so it was fear that caused it, not hatred, it was fear.
Right.
And so fear is when you are afraid, you want to conquer that fear instead of what I love about her is embracing it, communicating with it. What are you afraid about? What is that concept of fear? So for example, let's go back to our regular what my example before. So you go up to a person you're romantically interested in and you say, and the person rejects you. Okay. So what was that rejection about for you? What did it mean to you? Was it just that you were timid? Are you lacking something within yourself that maybe nothing? Maybe it was just that that person was in a place that they're not able to date or they,
The way I talk about that is you're not everybody's favorite flavor of ice cream.
right.
It could be no other reason that
Or
they just
maybe
don't like the
you
flavor.
or maybe you are their flavor of ice cream. It's just they feel that they themselves are fat, so they don't want to eat the ice cream because they think it'll make them fat. There's so many different aspects to so rejection 99% of the time again not a professional but just opinion isn't even about you. It's generally about them that they're feeling something within themselves that they can't connect with you even though you feel that connection. That's actually, generally speaking, something they're missing within themselves. So, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's just a separation and a difference in opinion on how and what you're looking
Right.
for. And in that time, because you know how many times people break up and get back together, or how many times the best friend becomes the lover. I mean, so many different stories. When there's a that was the other thing that vulnerability is key about, which is fun, is labeling. When we start to label things, yes, they offer us a way to understand certain items. However, at the same time, it also hinders us. So, for example, going back to what's a husband or a wife, a best friend, somebody you're familiar with, somebody you enjoy being around, how is that any different than a best friend?
Yeah.
So it's literally a label of, you are this to me, so therefore you must do this to me, instead of just enjoying that person for who they are. And now we have these labels, and or labels of even teachers or police officers. Let's go there. That's a very sensitive subject. Let's have fun with that one.
Ooh.
Police officers. People have these belief systems or labels that police officers are this way or that way.
Mhm.
Okay, whatever that may mean. They could, I mean, people have called them racist, people have called them heroes, people have called, I mean, all ends of the
Oh yeah, it
spectrum,
goes all
they
over.
all over. If you talk and meet a police officer, which I had to do when I got elected, they're these really cool human people who simply are doing their duty and working to the best of their ability within what they have. Are they perfect? Absolutely not. Do they try the best they can with everything they hold in their soul? Yes, all of them try. And if their own belief systems get in the way of what it might be and cause problems, well, then the police department takes care of that. And yeah, they get a real negative rap sometimes. They do. But we hear of the few that are terrible. We do, that are negative and hurt people. When a majority of cops, they will tell you one of the biggest traumas in their life is if they ever had to, they'd prefer to get shot than shoot somebody. If they had a choice, most times that, because the emotional trauma. Now they're going to do it to protect themselves, so if they have to, they will, and that's why we're looking at tasers and other options, because the emotional trauma that goes through shooting somebody can be very harmful to a person.
And let's just be clear there. Shooting somebody doesn't necessarily mean ending their life.
Right. It could mean just hurting them,
Yeah.
period, with a very
Well,
dangerous
I've
weapon.
even seen that in the professional fighting scene.
Yes.
In UFC, it's not common, but occasionally you get a fighter that's just unnaturally strong, and I've seen videos where bones break,
Right.
and when you are the direct cause to that on somebody else, I've watched a professional fighter get up and quit right there. It takes an emotional toll, whether you meant it or not.
Right. And so going back to the point of vulnerability is, we have these belief systems and perceptions on people, and that really hurts that vulnerability piece, because when you are labeling somebody else, that means you're saying you're this way, that's all you're going to be, nothing is going to change.
Right.
When that is quite opposite of how life works. We all change every second of every day and every moment. Nothing stays the same. Now,
Right.
you can have a pattern of behavior, but guess what? That's a choice. You can choose. We'll go back to another easy one, smoking. You could choose to stop smoking. Yes, it's hard.
Mhm.
I'm not a smoker, so I don't know how hard it is, but I've seen people struggle, but it's still a choice. You can always choose something else for whatever you want, but nothing stays the same. So vulnerability creates this option for yourself on emotion, and it becomes dangerous when you do label, or when you add some sort of fear-based belief system, because when you're afraid, it can really destroy you.
Right. And I mean, so we've talked a lot about we've talked a lot about how vulnerability looks and how it can make us feel. But I think it's going to be important for us to cover, how we can practice this, how we can, incorporate it into our daily lives, or at least be aware that we're doing it already.
The first thing is, I go back to it, examine your fears. I'm not saying fears are bad and you need them, but examine them. What is it that makes me afraid of this? Yep.
Expressing emotional honesty introspectively first, I think, is going to help you communicate that moving forward, definitely.
Exactly. And then going back to two big things, is asking for help when needed. That is something Brene Brown calls meaningful connections. How do you make these meaningful, positive connections? Yes, negative connections can serve you in some way, but the meaningful ones, the ones that embrace fun and laughter and love and excitement and passion and all these fun emotions, are the ones that really emphasize help, when sometimes the best help you can give somebody is when it's not labeled as help.
Yeah.
So I'll go back to the label. If I say, what can I do to help you? There can be a dynamic of, oh, well, I'm the subordinate, you're the boss or whatever. Even if it's not a business setting, like I'm lower or less than you because you need to help me. Or instead of the meaningful connection, it's maybe not just asking for help, but just saying, man, I need a break. Tell you what, let's go for a walk. Or like we talked about in a previous episode, let's go we don't always need to have the glorious vacation, just going to a park to do a podcast. That can be a meaningful connection.
Yeah.
You know, those type of things are exactly how we can build this whole asking for help without a power dynamic, and bringing in what Brene calls a meaningful connection. How can we connect in a way that doesn't put one person above or below the other? Or if there is that dynamic for whatever reason, parent child, teacher, whatever, teacher student, boss, how do you still bring in a collaborative concept where those labels don't mean power, they mean collaboration?
Right. And something else that you mentioned that Brene brought up earlier was how to turn the negative experiences into a learning experience, or even better, a positive or building experience. And one of those things, and this goes right in hand with that emotional honesty, is being willing to own up to your mistakes. Taking responsibility for your role in whatever it may be, whether it's a relationship or a series of events, or your community as a whole. It all has an impact, and you understanding that and taking responsibility for it, again, not a negative or a positive thing, is overall going to contribute to the better.
Right. No, I couldn't agree more. And I use this word a lot, but now I'm going to emphasize it: balance.
Mhm.
I mean, I saw this movie once called In Time with Justin Timberlake, and I can't remember. It was so long ago.
Is that the one where they have the
Yes, you have
clock?
time.
Yeah,
Instead of
and
money, it's time.
yeah, I've
And
seen
then
it.
if it runs out, you die,
Right.
right? So you live forever and you can keep getting more time added. But if you like, so for a cup of coffee is 5 minutes or whatever.
Yeah.
So you pay for your coffee with 5 minutes, and you have to determine, and if it goes to zero, you're you're done, you're gone.
Right.
And so it was interesting because um how you manage your time. Wait, what were we talking about? I gotta remember now. I was just thinking about the movie and I just zoned out completely because it's been so. I was trying to remember the movie itself. So I think it was Anna Kendrick that was in it. See, that's been bothering me. That's why I can't remember what I was gonna say, that that reference
I've only
vulnerability.
ever seen the TV version of it.
Ah, man,
Sorry.
that's all right. Wait, what were we talking about though?
We were just talking about turning negative interactions into learning experiences or building interactions, and
There's a reason I wanted to. Um, well, I did like the way what he did is he was able to not care anymore or have a fear base of dying.
oh yeah, and then they get into like gambling and stuff like that.
Yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so he decided, because that was the thing, is he was like, how would you like it if you lived forever? That was, and some guy in the movie gave him like 1,000 years because he was super rich.
Right.
And that goes back to, now I remember, that's fun, is if you could live forever, really would you? And in that scenario, both positive and negative, if you always just had positive experiences, nothing else, everything was so good, life would be boring. That was what comes out of that movie. Sorry, thank you, I got it now.
No,
Took me a minute.
yeah. Well,
But
and it builds on that idea, like we talked about in a previous episode with Fred Rogers. If you don't have the bad times, you don't know when the good times are
Times are
coming. Yeah.
right. And that's exactly right. And so it's just how you manage, like, but that may help you appreciate, man, this sucks, this hurts, but wow, that means I'm alive.
Yeah.
At least I get to enjoy being a human being because this negative thing is. And then when you go to the positive interactions, they just mean so much more.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we
No.
got there. We got there.
Yeah. No. It took us a while. We went on an adventure through a movie. I had a great time. Uh, but to bring us back on track, and as we're getting close on time here, uh, I wanted to finish up with just a book recommendation. I will be forefront. I have not even started this book yet. I've skimmed a little bit of it. It was recommended to me, but based on what I've been told about the book, it goes hand in hand with what we've been talking about here. And that would be Emotional Intelligence 2.0 by
Ooh,
Travis Bradberry and Gene Greaves. Um, and I think the quote on the front cover of the copy that I have is probably the best way to summarize it. It's from the Dalai Lama, and it says, succinctly explains how to deal with emotions creatively,
creatively.
thank you, and employ our intelligence in a beneficial way. Um, I will be reading this next. It's on my book list, and I'm sure there'll be a blog post about it.
Awesome. That looks like fun. But like also Brene Brown, Atlas of the Heart. So
Yeah, I'll add
have
that to the list.
have both of them.
All right, thank you for watching.
We appreciate all of you. Thank
If you
you.
haven't already, please like, subscribe, give us a rating on whatever podcast platform you prefer, and we'll see you next time.
All right.